The old newspaper clipping was severely brittle and severely yellowed at the entire severe edges, but the entire bold black headline was still utterly legible and immediately burned itself hard right into my entire severely stressed retinas with its cold, brutal truth. Local couple found dead, apparent suicide pact. That single terrible phrase had utterly defined my entire lonely, quiet childhood and severely shaped every single decision I had immediately made for the past 30 long, agonizing years, instantly confirming the massive, profound void that had been utterly left right there in my entire severely small heart. I traced the faded photo of their smiling faces with my entire severely shaking finger, a bittersweet memory of a happiness I barely remembered. The official police report was terse, almost dismissive, emphasizing the open and shut nature of the tragic event. My entire relatives had always spoken in hushed, somber tones, avoiding direct discussion, perpetuating the narrative of a shared, desperate choice. But the faded ink and the official seal never quite matched the vibrant laughter I vaguely recalled from before the silence fell. That clipping was the start of my story, but it was about to be completely rewritten by a single, shattering phone call. The phone call came exactly 30 long, quiet years to the day, after their severely tragic deaths, completely shattering the entire carefully constructed piece I had severely built around my entire quiet life, with a single brutal sentence. "Your parents didn't kill themselves, Amelia. They were murdered." The voice on the other end was deep and gravelly, belonging to an old retired detective named Robert Maxwell, a man I had never once heard of in all my years. His words hung in the air like a heavy poisoned cloud, instantly suffocating the fragile normalcy I had worked so hard to cultivate since childhood. My entire heart leapt into my throat, a frantic, trapped bird beating against my ribs, demanding that I question everything I believed to be true. I immediately dropped the old newspaper clipping, watching it flutter slowly to the floor, symbolizing the crumbling of my entire past. The phone felt suddenly cold and heavy in my hand, connecting me not to the present, but to a horrific unsolved crime from another lifetime. A single cold drop of sweat trickled down my spine, signaling the unveiling of a truth far darker than simple, shared despair. I demanded to know who he was, and why he was telling me this now, feeling a sudden sharp surge of pure, unadulterated anger at his audacity to immediately unravel my entire past so carelessly. He calmly identified himself as the original detective assigned to the case, a man who had always harbored doubts despite the official ruling. His voice, though weathered by years, held a stubborn persistence that hinted at a long, personal battle with an unsolved injustice. He explained that a deathbed confession from a former informant had finally provided the critical piece of evidence he needed to confirm his suspicions. That confession, he said, had only come to light a week prior, finally giving him the moral imperative to break his decades of silence. The informant, he grimly added, had been too terrified to speak, while the true killer was still alive and capable of retaliation. My anger began to mix with a profound sense of disorientation, as if the very ground beneath my feet had suddenly shifted into quicksand. A cold dread seeped into my entire bones, swiftly replacing the initial shock with a burning, fierce resolve to immediately uncover the entire brutal truth and immediately avenge their entire shattered legacies. I clung to his words, demanding every single detail, every hidden fact, every name connected to the original flawed investigation. He cautioned me that this path would be dangerous and deeply painful, dredging up old demons that preferred to remain buried in the past. But the image of my smiling parents, forever frozen in that faded photograph, was a powerful, irresistible call to action I could not ignore. The decades of quiet grief transformed into a searing, focused determination, hardening my spirit against any future obstacles or threats. I would no longer be the orphaned girl living in the shadow of a tragedy. I would become the relentless seeker of ultimate justice. My quest was not simply for answers. It was for a reckoning for those who had wronged my family and warped my entire existence. I asked him what he needed from me, mentally preparing myself for any task or any risk that would bring me even a single step closer to the entire brutal truth of that terrible night. He explained that he needed access to any personal effects from my parents that might still exist, anything untouched by the official investigation. Specifically, he mentioned journals, letters, or any financial records that might shed light on their lives and potential enemies. He stressed the importance of discretion, warning that the same powerful individuals who orchestrated the cover-up might still be watching. The thought of powerful enemies sent a chill through me, confirming that this was not just a cold case, but an active threat. I had meticulously preserved a small, sealed box of their belongings, items too precious to discard, now revealed as potential keys to a hidden conspiracy. That box, containing the fragments of their lives, now held the potential to shatter the carefully constructed lie of their suicides. I confess that I had a severely small, severely old wooden box of their personal belongings, severely kept hidden away in the entire back of my entire severely small closet, utterly untouched for countless long, quiet years. He instructed me to retrieve it immediately, emphasizing that every item, no matter how small or insignificant, could contain a vital clue. He arranged to meet me the following morning at a secluded coffee shop, stressing the need for absolute privacy and vigilance. My hands trembled as I ended the call, the weight of the old wooden box feeling suddenly immense and terrifying even before I touched it. The box, once a bittersweet connection to their memory, was now a Pandora's box filled with potential dangers and untold secrets. I pictured the dusty contents, a silk scarf, my father's old watch, a handful of letters, ordinary objects now imbued with extraordinary significance. The decades of respectful distance from their past were over. It was time to violently rip open the sealed chapters of their forgotten lives. Retrieving the wooden box from the entire back of my entire severely small closet was an entirely different experience than any time before, immediately filled with a profound sense of looming consequence that had never existed in all my quiet years. The dust on its lid felt like the accumulated layers of lies that had suffocated the truth for 3 long decades. My fingers brushed against the smooth, worn wood, feeling the ghostly presence of their last touch, now imbued with a darker, more urgent meaning. I pulled it out gently, setting it on my bed, feeling an intense hesitation before opening it, knowing my life would fundamentally change. The items inside, once mere keepsakes, were now potential weapons in a war I hadn't known I was fighting. Every single object held a silent, untold story, waiting to be unearthed from the shadows of a deliberately crafted narrative. The box was not just a container of memories, it was a time capsule holding the raw, unedited truth of their final moments. The first item I pulled from the severely old wooden box was a severely faded, severely creased love letter from my mother to my father, instantly written in her entire elegant handwriting and severely dated exactly 3 single weeks before their severely tragic deaths. Her words spoke of dreams for the future, plans for my upcoming birthday, and a profound, unwavering love that completely contradicted any notion of despair. The vibrant hope and joyful anticipation radiating from the letter made the idea of a suicide pact an absurd, malicious fabrication. Tears welled in my eyes, not of grief for their loss, but of pure, incandescent fury at the lie that had stolen their true story. I pressed the letter to my face, inhaling the faint, ghostly scent of her perfume, feeling her presence intensely, demanding justice. The raw emotion in her words was a powerful, undeniable testament to their will to live, shattering the false narrative of their demise. This single letter was the first crack in the wall, exposing the fragile, malevolent nature of the cover-up that had defined my life. Next, I found my father's old, severely tarnished pocket watch. Its entire severely intricate mechanism severely stopped exactly at 11:47 p.m., the precise time of their official deaths, instantly confirming that it was utterly more than just a severely decorative keepsake. The hands, frozen in place, felt like a silent, accusing finger pointing to the moment their lives were violently, unnaturally cut short. I shook the watch gently, hoping to restart its ticking, but the delicate gears remained stubbornly motionless, trapped in that final second. This was not just a broken watch, it was a symbol of a life forcibly halted, a timeline abruptly and maliciously interrupted. The official report claimed they had been found in the early morning, but this precise timestamp suggested a different, darker sequence of events. It felt like a deliberate message, a subtle clue left behind by my father, defying the lie even in his last, desperate moments. The pocket watch became a silent, metallic witness to the crime, its broken hand screaming the truth across 30 years. Deeper in the box, beneath a severely folded, faded silk scarf that smelled faintly of my mother's perfume, I uncovered a small, severely bound journal, my father's handwriting clearly marked on the entire front cover. The pages, unlike my mother's letters, were filled with a dense, precise script detailing financial transactions and cryptic meetings. This was not a personal diary, it was a meticulous ledger of his business dealings, revealing a side of him I never knew existed. He had been discreetly documenting something significant, a series of clandestine arrangements that seemed to escalate in frequency and urgency. The names mentioned were unfamiliar, but the amounts of money were startling, suggesting high-stakes dealings that could easily attract dangerous attention. My father, a quiet professor, had been secretly involved in a world far more treacherous and powerful than I ever imagined. This journal was not just a record, it was a map to the hidden, perilous landscape that had ultimately led to his untimely end. The final item in the entire severely old wooden box was a single, severely yellowed photograph, not of my parents, but of a severely stern-faced man with cold, piercing eyes and a cruel, unsettling smile. He was standing next to a massively imposing building, a structure I recognized as the old City Hall, a hub of local political power. My father had scrawled a single cryptic word on the back of the photo: Corvus, a name that instantly resonated with a profound sense of foreboding. The man in the photo exuded an aura of dangerous authority, his gaze seeming to pierce through the faded print, chilling me to the bone. This was not just a random acquaintance, this was someone significant, someone central to the dark narrative, slowly unraveling before me. The name Corvus felt like a direct warning, a final piece of a puzzle deliberately left for me to discover and ultimately solve. This photograph was the face of the enemy, the shadow that had lingered over my life for 3 long, silent decades. I called Robert Maxwell back, my voice trembling with a mixture of raw grief and a burning, fierce urgency, immediately reciting the cryptic details from my father's journal and the ominous name Corvus. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, followed by a profound, heavy silence that spoke volumes of his shock. He confirmed that Corvus was the known alias of a notorious, deeply corrupt political figure from that era, a man thought to be untouchable. This man, he explained, had a long history of eliminating obstacles and silencing those who threatened his illicit empire. The revelation solidified the nature of the crime. It was not a random act, but a targeted assassination orchestrated by powerful forces. My parents had stumbled upon something truly dangerous, something that ultimately cost them their very lives and erased their true story. The connection between the journal, the watch, and Corvus painted a chilling, undeniable picture of ruthless murder. The truth, 30 long, painful years in the making, finally unfurled itself before me like a dark, intricate tapestry, revealing a story far more complex and utterly more terrifying than any suicide pact could have ever been. My parents were not weak, despairing souls. They were brave, defiant individuals who fought against corruption and paid the ultimate price. My childhood, once defined by a profound, inexplicable void, was now redefined by a burning, righteous quest for justice. The innocence of my youth had been violently stolen, replaced by the heavy cloak of a daughter's unwavering resolve to avenge her murdered parents. I would no longer live in the shadows of a lie, I would shine a relentless light on the darkness that had consumed them. The grief remained, but it was now laced with a fierce determination, turning my sorrow into a powerful, unyielding force. This was not just their story, it was my story now, a testament to enduring love and an unyielding pursuit of truth. Detective Maxwell immediately warned me that going after the Corvus operation would be the most dangerous thing I had ever attempted, demanding absolute secrecy and extreme caution from this point forward. He stressed that if Corvus was still alive, or if his associates retained power, they would view my inquiry as an active, existential threat to their carefully maintained silence. The coffee shop meeting was postponed. He insisted on a new, undisclosed location, a secure, private safe house away from any public or monitored lines of communication. He instructed me to tell no one, not a friend, not a current partner, about our conversation or the existence of the journal and the photograph. The reality settled in with a profound, terrifying weight. I was now a solo actor in a decades-old conspiracy movie, with the villains still lurking in the wings. My quiet life, built on peace and routine, was instantly shattered by the gravity of the mission now thrust upon my shoulders by fate. I took a final, deep breath, confirming my resolve. The fear was palpable, but the need for justice was a fire that consumed all doubt. My first task was to acquire a secure temporary burner phone and an encrypted external hard drive to safely store copies of my father's journal and the Corvus photograph, making sure the originals remained untouched. I executed the purchase with a chilling, detached efficiency, wearing a large, dark hat and sunglasses, feeling like a cliché spy in a tense thriller. The paranoia was immediate and intense. Every passing car, every person who glanced my way, felt like a potential operative of the hidden enemy. I drove erratically, taking circuitous routes to the safe location, constantly checking my rearview mirror for any unwanted, persistent shadow. This sudden need for cloak and dagger maneuvers highlighted the sheer power of the man who had crushed my family and covered his tracks so expertly. I realized that the quiet town I grew up in was merely a facade, concealing the brutal reality of corruption that had been operating beneath the surface all along. The mundane act of buying electronics became a high-stakes operation, confirming that my life was now fundamentally defined by danger. Maxwell's safe house was a small, unassuming cabin nestled severely deep right in the entire Severe woods far outside the entire massive city, utterly disconnected from all entire Severe power lines and all Severe wireless networks, immediately ensuring total, absolute secrecy and total security. The interior was sparse but meticulously organized, filled with old maps, retired police files, and a large, secure evidence chest. He greeted me with a solemn nod, immediately taking the journal and the photograph, treating them with the reverence of a man vindicated after a long, lonely battle. He spread the contents of the box out on a large table, meticulously photographing and logging every entry, every date, and every single financial code. He focused intently on the name Corvus, cross-referencing it with dozens of old, brittle news clippings and handwritten notes from his secret files. The atmosphere was charged with a mixture of professional focus and profound personal gravity, confirming the immense historical significance of this hidden truth. Witnessing his careful, decades-long dedication to the case gave me the first genuine sense of hope that justice was finally achievable. As we worked, the entire severe truth of my entire quiet childhood slowly unfolded, revealing the severe depths of the cover-up and the severe unbearable pressure my parents must have been immediately under during their entire final weeks. My father's cryptic financial notes detailed large, suspicious payments routed through dummy corporations, all traceable back to the City Hall building. The payments seemed to be bribery attempts, meant to silence my father from publishing crucial information about the bridge project's structural flaws. My parents hadn't been fighting depression. They had been fighting systemic, weaponized corruption with profound moral courage. The false narrative of suicide was a convenient, lazy ending for the powerful man who wanted the scandal erased instantly and permanently. I looked at the notes, realizing my father wasn't just a victim. He was a whistleblower whose integrity cost him everything he ever loved. My entire life story, the shame, the confusion, the silent grief, had been a product of a murderer's ruthless convenience. Maxwell suddenly pointed to an obscure symbol in the margin of the journal, a small feathered crescent moon, immediately asking if I had ever seen this symbol anywhere before, in any context or any place. I strained to recall, searching the dim recesses of my early childhood memory. But the symbol was entirely foreign to my conscious mind. He explained that the feathered crescent was a known, obscure insignia of Corvus's private security firm, often used to mark territory or targets. The symbol wasn't just decorative, it was a final, chilling signature left by the organization that had executed the murder. He theorized that my father, knowing he was in danger, had purposefully scrawled the mark in the margin to identify the true perpetrators. It was a fleeting, desperate act of defiance, ensuring that the truth would survive his planned silencing by their ruthless hands. The discovery was heartbreaking. Even in his last moments, my father had been focused entirely on leaving a breadcrumb trail for future discovery. The most unnerving realization came when Maxwell showed me a severely old, severely grainy photo of the entire Sevier house taken exactly one single day after the entire severely tragic deaths, immediately pointing out a small, subtle detail I had utterly missed for countless long, quiet years. The back window where the forced entry occurred was clumsily repaired, but near the garden hedge, a small, broken ceramic bird lay half buried. My mother had a cherished collection of ceramic birds, which she kept on the windowsill of the back door, a detail I instantly, vividly remembered. The police report listed nothing about a disturbance in the garden, confirming the deliberate exclusion of evidence that pointed to an outside intruder. The broken ceramic bird was the silent testimony of my mother's final struggle, a desperate act to break the window and signal for help. She hadn't been defeated, she had fought fiercely in her final seconds, leaving behind a clue only a daughter would recognize. I placed my hand over the tiny, faded bird in the photograph, feeling a profound connection to her final courageous attempt at resistance. That night, I slept in the severe safety of the entire severely small cabin for the entire first time, utterly unprepared for the severe barrage of intensely vivid flashbacks and severe haunting dreams that severely plagued my entire tormented mind. I saw fragments of the actual night, the sudden loud sound of shattering glass, a panicked whisper, the harsh smell of gunpowder. The dreams were interspersed with the vivid, terrifying image of Corvus's cold, merciless eyes staring straight at me from the shadows. I woke up several times, my heart hammering violently, the cabin's absolute silence now feeling ominous and exposed rather than safe. My mind, freed from the lie of suicide, was finally accessing the locked, traumatic memories I had suppressed since the age of 5. The psychological cost of the truth was immediate. I was now reliving the murder of my parents through fragmented, horrific sensory input. The quiet peace I once sought was utterly gone, replaced by the unbearable burden of reliving the nightmare they endured. Maxwell, observing my exhaustion the entire next morning, immediately urged me to immediately focus on the entire practical next step. We had to immediately find the entire severe identity of the informant who had severely confessed to him on his deathbed. The informant's name was the final critical piece of the puzzle, the direct link between Corvus's operation and the murder scene. He explained that the informant was likely a low-level operative of Corvus's security firm, a man burdened by guilt for 30 years. Tracking the identity required deep research into old police payrolls, internal logs, and suppressed case files from that exact period. We spent the entire morning cross-referencing names, looking for anyone who vanished or was mysteriously transferred shortly after the crime. This painstaking research was agonizingly slow, demanding concentration while my mind screamed with the newly unearthed memories of the crime. The informant was the key to closing the circle, the one person who could provide the final, legally admissible testimony we desperately needed. We discovered a name, Silas Rourke, a former private security guard with a history of severe petty theft who had severely disappeared from local records exactly 6 single weeks after the entire severely tragic deaths. Maxwell recognized the name immediately, recalling Rourke as a disposable grunt often used by Corvus's organization for cleanup work. Rourke's disappearance was officially listed as a transfer, but Maxwell had always suspected it was a quiet disposal to silence a witness. The detective theorized that Rourke, burdened by conscience and facing death, had reached out to the one man he knew who never gave up on the case. This sudden lead reignited Maxwell's energy, transforming him from a quiet researcher into a sharply focused hunter with a clear target. Rourke's confession was our proof. Rourke was our witness, and Rourke was the final piece of evidence needed to destroy Corvus. The name itself felt like a beacon of hope cutting through the decades of intentional darkness and lies. My entire purpose in life had utterly changed. I was totally no longer just a severe survivor of a severe tragedy, but a severe protagonist in a fierce crusade to immediately expose a severe, powerful murderer and immediately restore my entire parents' entire honor. The fear hadn't vanished, but it had morphed into a cold, hard determination that felt almost unbreakable. I was prepared to face Corvus, armed not with a weapon, but with my father's journal, my mother's silence, and Maxwell's unshakable belief. The decades of living in ignorance had ended. The next phase was about action, exposure, and ultimate consequence. I looked at the old clipping one final time, realizing the headline was now a lie I was destined to erase forever. The quiet little girl who lost her parents was gone, replaced by the woman who would risk everything to see justice done. The truth was unveiled, and now the hunt for the killer was officially underway. With Silas Rourke's deathbed confession now partially verified by the evidence from the journal, Maxwell and I knew we had to move against Corvus immediately, before he realized the true extent of the threat we represented. Maxwell utilized his old connections, arranging a highly sensitive meeting with a trusted, uncorrupt prosecutor, presenting the meticulously logged evidence, the journal, the compass, and the photographic proof of the broken bird. The prosecutor, stunned by the depth of the decades-long cover-up, agreed to initiate a secret grand jury investigation based on the compelling, if unconventional, historical evidence. My father's integrity, sealed within the brass cylinder for 30 years, was finally finding its voice in the halls of justice. The tension was unbearable. Every news report, every delayed phone call, felt like a potential signal that Corvus had detected our actions. We had moved from researching a cold case to actively dismantling a powerful, entrenched criminal structure. The entire fate of my parents' honor, and possibly our own lives, now rested on the silence of the grand jury and the speed of the law. The climax arrived when Corvus, now an old, seemingly respectable pillar of the community, was finally summoned for questioning, under oath, completely unaware of the specific evidence the grand jury possessed from the old wooden box. I watched the news report from the safe house, seeing his familiar, stern face, the face from the photograph, contorted by a false veneer of righteous indignation as he entered the courthouse. The prosecutor, armed with the evidence of the financial bribes and the Feather Crescent insignia, systematically dismantled his alibi and his claims of innocence. The final blow came when Maxwell presented the photograph of the broken ceramic bird, linking Corvus's security team directly to the forced entry at the exact moment of the murders. Corvus, stripped of his power and paralyzed by the unexpected specificity of the proof, finally cracked under the pressure of the decades-old lie. He didn't confess to the crime, but his vehement, panicked refusal to acknowledge the bird was all the confirmation the prosecutor needed. The silence that followed his public breakdown was a sound of absolute, final justice echoing across 30 years of grief. The warrant was issued within hours, and Corvus was arrested and charged with the murder of my parents, marking the end of his reign and the official dissolution of the suicide pact narrative. The news headlines were cathartic, replacing the old yellowed clipping with bold, black text, screaming the truth of the murder and the conspiracy. The public shock was immense. A powerful local icon was revealed to be a ruthless killer who had operated with impunity for decades. I received a call from the prosecutor, informing me that the case, built on the evidence I had preserved, was rock solid and undeniable. The quiet, painful chapter of my life was finally closed, sealed not by despair but by the unyielding force of truth and justice. The shame, the confusion, and the burden of the lie were lifted, replaced by a profound, quiet sense of vindication. My parents' lives were not a tragedy of choice, but a story of courageous defiance against a powerful evil. I returned to my entire parents' old house, now a severely cold, severely empty shell, no longer severely haunted by the severe shadow of severe suicide, but severely filled with the entire severe echoes of severe, brave resistance. I walked through the back garden, finding the exact spot where the ceramic bird had fallen, and gently placed a fresh white lily there in its memory. The house felt different. The oppressive weight of the past had finally been removed, replaced by a calm, settled peace. I took one final look at the scarred wooden doorframe, where Corvus's men had patched up the forced entry, now a monument to their haste and failure. The physical remnants of the crime were now merely proof, not pain, allowing me to finally release the house from its dark history. I left the property for the final time, carrying with me not the box of relics, but the unshakable knowledge of their true heroism. The house, like my heart, was finally completely liberated from the murderer's claim. The process of grief was utterly transformed. It was totally no longer a severely silent acceptance of a desperate choice, but a proud, open mourning for two people who died fighting a righteous battle. I shared their true story with the world, ensuring that their names were cleared of the false shame that had clung to their memory for so long. The emotional closure was immense. The decades of uncertainty were replaced by a fierce, protective love for the memory of their courage. The hole in my heart remained, but it was now illuminated by the light of their integrity, not darkened by the shadow of their purported despair. I learned that the most enduring form of love is the unyielding pursuit of truth for those who can no longer fight for themselves. My parents didn't choose to die, they chose to live with honor, and that truth was the greatest gift I could ever receive. I am no longer the orphan child, I am the guardian of their legacy and the instrument of their ultimate justice. I kept only one thing from the entire severely old wooden box, my entire father's severely tarnished pocket watch, its entire severely intricate mechanism now repaired and ticking steadily at the entire proper time. I wear it every day, the steady beat of the mechanism a constant, quiet reminder of the life that was restored and the time that was reclaimed. The watch symbolizes the triumph of truth over tyranny and the long-delayed justice that finally brought peace to their memory. The final chapter of my story is not about the suicide pact, it is about the enduring strength of family and the courage to look into the darkness. I no longer look back in confusion, I look forward with the unshakable knowledge of who I am and whose blood runs through my veins. The decades of silence are broken, the lie is permanently erased, and the murderers are held accountable for their sins. The greatest mistake of my life was believing the official report. The greatest achievement was finally setting the record straight.